right, guys, let's talk about this. Because if what's being whispered right now is true, hip-hop history is about to get flipped upside down. Shakur, the rap icon the world thought was lost in 1996, has allegedly been alive and in hiding for nearly 3 decades. And now shocking new reports suggest he's preparing to come back. Not with music, but with evidence that could bring 2 of the most powerful moguls in the game, Jay-Z and Diddy, crashing down. This isn't just another internet rumor or a blurry photo of a guy in a bandana walking through Havana. We're talking about whispers tied to law enforcement and insiders insisting that what's about to unfold isn't an album release, it's a takedown. For almost 30 years, the official story was clear. A Vegas drive-by, 4 bullets, a desperate hospital fight, 6 days in limbo, and then the end. Case closed. But here we are, decades later, and the chessboard looks completely different. While Jay-Z and Diddy are battling lawsuits, headlines, and courtroom drama, a new rumor surfaces that's so destabilizing the word comeback doesn't even feel strong enough. The story sounds simple but almost unthinkable. Tupac didn't just disappear, he outplayed everyone. He vanished into the shadows, not to run away, but to gather evidence that could burn down the careers and reputations of the very men suspected of orchestrating his disappearance. And if the latest leaks are even half true, federal agents have allegedly tracked him down, not to arrest him, but to flip the script on Jay-Z and Diddy at the very moment their empires are buckling under lawsuits and fresh indictments. Think about that. The same men who built legacies of wealth, power, and untouchable status could now be standing on a crumbling foundation. And this isn't just online chatter anymore. Reports are coming from inside the music industry and federal circles, the kinds of sources that don't usually speak unless they've got paperwork to back it up. According to insiders, agents have allegedly reached out to Shakur himself or to someone representing him in an effort to secure hard evidence. Documents, phone recordings, financial trails, even surveillance tapes. Evidence that could potentially connect Jay-Z and Diddy not just to shady business deals, but to the orchestration of the Vegas shooting itself, the night that changed hip-hop forever. Here's where it shifts from maybe to, oh no, this might actually be real. These same sources claim sealed evidence from the 1990s, thought to be destroyed or forgotten, has been cross-referenced with brand new intel, allegedly coming from Shakur or his inner circle. Suddenly, the FBI isn't chasing ghost stories anymore. They're looking closely at someone who may have been living quietly all these years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. Picture it, Shakur watching from the sidelines as Diddy and Jay-Z amassed untouchable wealth, power, and the myth of invincibility, all while knowing their rise was built on the same bloodstained chessboard that forced him into exile. For years, the headlines stacked up. Diddy facing mounting legal troubles, accusations of a criminal enterprise running through his empire, Jay-Z appearing in lawsuits, trying to distance himself from Diddy even as his own name surfaces in those filings. It's like watching a house of cards built over 30 years finally begin to shake. And then, right on cue, the ghost the industry tried to bury reappears, with the matchbook in his hand. And we have to talk about the Cuba connection, because this isn't just a side note. It's the backbone of the entire conspiracy. Remember all those rumors? The grainy nightclub videos, the Havana locals swearing they saw Shakur buying groceries, the shaky YouTube clips of a man in a hoodie with sunglasses and a goatee that looked just a little too familiar. For years, people dismissed it all as fan fiction, wishful thinking from a community that couldn't let go of a legend. But then came Michael Nice, a former bodyguard, who stepped forward with a story that pushed the whispers into overdrive. He claimed to have audio and video of Fidel Castro himself confirming that he had sanctioned Shakur's exile in Cuba. According to Nice, Castro orchestrated a full double switch, a staged body at the hospital, a bribed staff, and a covert flight out. Black Panthers involved in the logistics, secret handshakes on a Barbados airstrip. Before Shakur disappeared once again, this time under the official protection of a government that despised the same American establishment he did. Sounds wild, right? But imagine it. Imagine the betrayal Tupac must have felt, believing the people closest to him, his collaborators, his so-called brothers, were the same ones who set him up in Vegas. And then imagine the patience it would take to spend nearly 3 decades in hiding, watching from the sidelines while your enemies prosper, carefully planning a comeback that would only matter if the timing was perfect. If the whispers are true, Shakur didn't just run for his life. He turned exile into leverage, slowly gathering what insiders now describe as a treasure chest of intelligence on the very men who became symbols of untouchable power. According to people tied to old-school Black Panther networks, Shakur wasn't living free in Cuba so much as living protected, almost confined, but never powerless. He traded information for safety, secrets for sanctuary, biding his time until the world was ready to hear him again. And now the timing is impossible to ignore. Why step out of the shadows now? Why after 30 years? The answer seems cold, calculated, and logical. Because Jay-Z and Diddy have never looked weaker. Diddy's empire is collapsing in real time. Multiple lawsuits piling up, lurid headlines about those infamous freak-off parties, former employees breaking their NDAs to tell stories that can't be unheard. He's sitting in a Brooklyn detention center, denied bail, facing charges so severe that not even his legendary bankroll can bail him out. Meanwhile, Jay-Z, the billionaire once considered untouchable, is suddenly pulled into a lawsuit with accusations explosive enough that his legal team is scrambling to shut it down before his name goes down with Diddy's. These two men were allies, rivals, business partners, sometimes competing, sometimes cooperating, but always moving like they knew where the skeletons were buried, even if they never touched a shovel themselves. And now, if Shakur truly has evidence, this isn't just about vengeance. It's about leverage, justice, maybe even redemption, not only for himself, but for his mother's legacy, for the people who never stopped believing, and for the music industry that watched him vanish. Insiders say federal investigators are connecting dots across decades. Old phone records from the 90s resurfacing, sealed testimonies lining up with recordings nobody had ever seen before. And in a twist that feels like a breaking point, Keefe, the last man linked to the Vegas drive-by, is behind bars, allegedly ready to cut a deal to save himself. Even Suge Knight, tweeting from prison, is calling for justice for Shakur. For years, the narrative was simple. Diddy was the puppet master, the ruthless money man who allegedly signed off on $1 million bounty to settle a score. But lately, the whispers have shifted. New claims are surfacing, tied to dusty industry ledgers and cryptic comments from investigators. Allegedly, financial records show Jay-Z's associates wiring funds to individuals now implicated in the Vegas operation. And intercepted calls from the months leading up to Shakur's disappearance, they've reportedly been cross-checked against Jay-Z's whereabouts, painting a far more suspicious picture. Not of a bystander, but of a silent partner, waiting in the wings to inherit an empire once Shakur was out of the way. So let's ask the question that no one wanted to ask out loud. Is it possible that the man the world idolized, the kingmaker who raised champagne glasses with Diddy at billionaire brunches, who rebuilt the industry in his own image, was pulling strings behind the scenes the whole time? These whispers aren't coming from gossip blogs or bitter rivals. Former security contractors, ex-death row insiders, and even retired federal agents have started hinting at anomalies in Jay-Z's timeline around the Vegas shooting. Could hip-hop's ultimate mogul owe his crown to a scheme darker than anyone dared imagine? And the stakes? They've never been higher. If Shakur really does hold the evidence people claim he has, and if he's ready to hand it to federal investigators, then the music world isn't looking at just another scandal. It's staring at the possible collapse of its most powerful dynasty. And here's the kicker. Insiders say the fear isn't of Shakur himself, but of what his evidence could reveal. The embarrassment, the shattered reputations, the loss of the myth these men built around themselves. Now sure, we've heard wild rumors before. Shakur spotted in Havana, Shakur sneaking into a nightclub in disguise, even ridiculous photoshopped pictures of him alongside Beyonce. But this time, the difference is context. Right now, Diddy's world is already in flames. He's under criminal indictment, his name tied to lurid accounts of those infamous freak-off parties, decades of pay-to-play allegations. Headlines brand him hip-hop's Jeffrey Epstein, with a shadowy circle allegedly running his empire like a criminal syndicate. Meanwhile, Jay-Z's once unshakable image is cracking. His legal team is throwing everything at the wall. Claims of blackmail, attacks on accusers, endless motions to delay the inevitable. For years, these two men stood shoulder to shoulder at Roc Nation brunches, appearing invincible. But now they look isolated, cornered, and maybe, for the first time, truly afraid. And when you go back to the old clues, they suddenly feel different. Suge Knight's cryptic comments in interviews, Afeni Shakur's hints that her son may have chosen silence, the Makaveli persona, a strategist faking his own death to outmaneuver his enemies. Why did the coroner's report botch the most basic details? Why did the cremator retire the very next day, never to be heard from again? Why did Havana locals keep reporting sightings of someone who looked exactly like Tupac? Now, with federal investigators reportedly re-examining every scrap of evidence, surveillance tapes, payment logs, confidential informant notes, the walls are closing in. The line between myth and reality has blurred so much that what once sounded like fantasy now reads like a blueprint. Jay-Z and Diddy, for all their legendary success, suddenly look like prisoners of a past they thought was buried beneath the Nevada desert. And somewhere in the shadows, maybe in a Cuban apartment, maybe just off camera, a legend could be watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. And if Shakur truly has the goods, if even a fraction of these whispers turn out to be true, then the fallout won't stop at Diddy or Jay-Z. It will ripple through hip-hop, shaking the entire industry to its foundation. Already whispers are spreading like wildfire. Dozens of accomplices, lawyers, assistants, managers, even former bodyguards are either being subpoenaed or suddenly vacationing overseas. People who once strutted through the industry like royalty are now deleting social media, changing phones, cutting ties, hoping to erase any trace before the feds come knocking. The old code of silence, the one that kept secrets buried for decades, has finally cracked. And as leaks spill into the headlines, one haunting question lingers. How many careers, fortunes, and carefully crafted legacies are about to vanish before the dust settles? The dominoes are falling, and the collapse is bigger than just a couple of superstars caught in scandal. What we're witnessing is the slow-motion unraveling of institutions that shaped the last 30 years of pop culture. Think about it. Diddy, once the untouchable king of the all-white Hamptons party, now sits in a concrete cell, his future hanging on a federal trial that threatens to drag every secret out into the open. The headlines are brutal: human trafficking, racketeering, alleged abuse, criminal enterprise. These phrases now stick to his name like glue, while his legal team burns through millions trying to plug holes in a ship that's already sinking. Every time another lawsuit lands, more enablers scramble to cut deals, and more victims step forward to tell their stories. For a man who once controlled the entire narrative with a single tweet or a flashy music video, Diddy suddenly can't buy silence. He's trapped in a storm of his own making. Every PR stunt backfires. Every denial is met with more revelations. The man who built an empire on image and spectacle is now powerless to control the story. Meanwhile, Jay-Z, the man who branded himself the blueprint for moguldom, is learning a harsh truth. Even the highest penthouse comes with a glass floor. Civil suits are piling up, each one threatening to pry open years of protected business records, sealed contracts, and private communications. For any billionaire, the legal filings alone would be enough to keep an army of crisis managers awake at night. But what's worse is the shift in public mood. Fans who once applauded his every power move are now combing through his lyrics, dissecting old interviews, and digging into photos from decades past, hunting for the moment ambition turned into conspiracy. In Jay-Z's defense, it's a juggling act. One moment he frames himself as the victim of blackmail. The next, he distances himself from a man he once called brother. But let's be honest, if Shakur's rumored evidence surfaces, if that alleged treasure trove really exists, then it won't just be another scandal. It'll rewrite every glossy narrative Jay-Z has ever sold to the public. And no rebrand, no consultant, no billion-dollar partnership can polish that shine back to what it once was. Now picture the aftershocks if this all detonates at once. Two men who seem larger than life, billionaires with global influence, beverage empires, fashion labels, and connections that stretch from Wall Street to the White House, suddenly revealed as the architects of betrayal. And not just betrayal of a single man, but betrayal of a culture they claimed to represent, to elevate, even as they allegedly built their power on the silence and suffering of others. So ask yourself, if that day comes, if the files really surface, how far will the fallout reach? This isn't just about Diddy or Jay-Z anymore. This is about the credibility of the entire industry, the legacies of the biggest names in hip-hop, and the trust of fans who believed in a story that may have been false from the start. Because once the curtain is pulled back, there's no putting the pieces neatly together again. The empire that once felt eternal is now shaking on its foundations, and the whole world is watching to see which walls crumble first. We're not talking about another messy tabloid scandal or a celebrity meltdown. We're talking about revelations that could erase entire catalogs from streaming platforms, force award shows to rewrite history, and send corporate sponsors sprinting for the exits. Decades of mentorship programs, charity foundations, and carefully polished legacy projects could be wiped away in an instant, replaced with the ugly truth hiding behind the headlines. And if that truth arrives with Shakur's long-rumored return, no label or media giant on earth will be ready for the fallout. Even the people who used to smirk and say they knew the real story are starting to sweat. Former road managers suddenly can't be reached. Big-name attorneys are quietly leaking that multiple celebrities are under investigation. Meanwhile, private jets are flying in and out of Miami and LA packed with PR firms and crisis experts who, for the first time, can't guarantee damage control. Those old industry alliances, the handshakes in back rooms, the whispered favors, the "I'll cover for you if you cover for me" deals, are dissolving under the weight of subpoenas and sealed recordings. And for fans who grew up believing these men were untouchable, the mood is whiplash. Because betrayal always cuts deepest when idols fall from the highest place. And here's the chilling thought. What if Shakur saw all of this coming? For years, fans dissected his Makaveli persona, the cryptic lyrics, the album covers, the interviews that felt like puzzles left behind for those paying attention. Exit Tupac, enter Makaveli. The name itself, borrowed from Niccolo Machiavelli, the strategist who wrote about faking your own death to outmaneuver your enemies. Was it poetic theater or a survival blueprint? What if every lyric about betrayal, every line about revenge was less entertainment and more a veiled warning? The clues seem to sit in plain sight. Album art that blurs the line between life and legend. Lyrics that promise a return. That infamous photo where Tupac's eyes seem to follow you, daring you to look past the illusion. Even the wild rumors fit when you stack them together. The Havana sighting, Suge Knight's cryptic confession, bodyguards claiming they had audio and video proof of Castro's involvement, and the holes in the official story? They've been there the whole time. A coroner's report with basic mistakes, witnesses who vanished, a cremator who retired immediately after the job and disappeared. Posthumous albums that felt almost too precise, too prophetic, as if each track was a message aimed straight at his enemies. Was the entire Makaveli arc Tupac's way of saying, "I'm not finished yet"? That's the terrifying possibility gripping the industry right now. Because if Shakur really orchestrated his own escape, then every assumption about that night in Vegas collapses. Was the shootout staged? Were the hospital scenes manipulated? Was his disappearance the greatest piece of performance art in music history? Or the desperate act of a man who knew the walls were closing in? Even the skeptics, the same ones who laughed at the Cuba theories, are now digging through old footage, zooming in frame by frame, looking for the one detail that flips the entire narrative upside down. And beyond the mystery, one bigger question lingers. What does this mean for hip-hop itself? For decades, the Tupac versus Biggie story, the East Coast versus West Coast saga, was framed as rivalry and tragedy. But if the roots of modern hip-hop are tangled in a cover-up darker than the lyrics ever suggested, then the entire foundation of the culture is called into question. And here's the part no one can ignore. The silence. The eerie, calculated silence from those who spent decades at the top. The people who built fortunes while the rest of the world mourned. The silence that now feels less like respect and more like complicity. Beyoncé and other A-list collaborators, once eager to pose beside Jay-Z and Diddy at charity galas and award shows, have gone noticeably silent. The glittering social circles, once overflowing with invitations and photo ops, have shrunk down to a handful of anxious loyalists. Even the music press, an industry that for years tiptoed around these giants, is finally sharpening its teeth, digging into old contracts, exposing hush-money payoffs, and interviewing people who were too scared to speak until now. And here's the reality. There's no playbook for surviving a storm like this. Not when the very legend you helped erase might be returning, with receipts. Insiders say the fear isn't confined to two men anymore. The dread has spread to the major labels, where whispers suggest the FBI is preparing a wave of indictments that could sweep up far more than Diddy and Jay-Z. Producers, handlers, executives, people who thought they'd stay forever in the shadows, may suddenly find themselves in the spotlight. As one former Def Jam manager put it bluntly, if Pac has the tapes and the feds have the leverage, it's going to be a bloodbath in the boardrooms. The fear isn't just public shame. It's about fortunes, entire empires, built on illusions now cracking wide open. And then comes the question no one can answer. If Tupac does step into the light, evidence in hand, what happens to everything we thought we knew? Do we erase Diddy and Jay-Z from the pantheon of hip-hop? Do we celebrate Shakur as the ultimate survivor, or interrogate the price of his silence? Or is this all just another illusion, the final twist from a man who made his name blurring the line between myth and reality until no one could tell the difference? The FBI's renewed interest, Jay-Z's mounting legal battles, Diddy's empire melting in real time, the whispers of Shakur's return growing louder. It all feels like the stage is set for hip-hop's ultimate reckoning. We may be days, weeks, or months away from an explosion that makes the East Coast-West Coast war look tame by comparison. Or maybe we're still trapped in the labyrinth Shakur built, chasing shadows while the real answers sit in a vault in Havana, or a briefcase in a federal safe house. One thing's for sure, the truth is coming, and nothing will ever be the same. So what do you think? Is this the final act for the old guard? Or just another twist waiting to shock us all? Drop your theories in the comments, because the next bombshell could land at any moment. Until then, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep watching, because hip-hop history is about to be rewritten, and nobody escapes untouched.